Okay, let's read Most Beautiful by Ruskin Bond. About the author, Ruskin Bond was born to British parents on May 19, 1934, in Kasauli, a small town in the foothills of the Himalayas. As a child, he spent most of his time in the princely state of Jamnagar. His grandparents lived in the Doon Valley in the Himalayas, and he stayed with them as well. Bond went to the Bishop Cotton School in Shimla. After completing after completing his school education in 1950, Bond went to England. His love for the Himalayan mountains haunted him, and while still a teenager, he wrote his first novel, The Room on the Roof, which won the John Llewellyn Rhys Prize Award, awarded to a British Commonwealth writer under 30. Ruskin Bond has lived in Missouri for more than 3 decades now. Not only are the mountains his home, but are also his greatest source of inspiration as a writer of short story. On February 18, 1993, the Sahitya Academy of India presented Ruskin Bond the award for the most outstanding Indian writer in English. Ruskin Bond's stories reflect his passion for the trees, wildflowers, birds, animals, rivers, and the simple hill folk who are the life of the Himalayas. About the story. In Most Beautiful, the author's sympathy is complete for the retarded child who seeks love. His bitterness at his own inadequacies and society's indifference are brought to the forefront very effectively. I don't quite know why I found that particular town so heartless. Perhaps because of its crowded, claustrophobic atmosphere, its congested and insanitary lanes, its weary people. One day I found the children of the bazaar tormenting a deformed, retarded boy. About a dozen boys, between the ages of 8 and 14, were jeering at the retard, who was making things worse who was making things worse for himself by confronting the gang and shouting abuses at them. The boy was 12 or 13, judging by his face, but had the height of an 8 or 9-year-old. His legs were thick, short, and bowed. He had a small chest, but his arms were long, making him rather ape like in his attitude. His forehead and cheeks were pitted with the scars of smallpox. He was ugly by normal standards, and the gibberish he spoke did nothing to discourage his tormentors. They threw mud they threw mud and stones at him, while keeping well out of his reach. Few can be more cruel than a gang of schoolboys in high spirits. I was an uneasy observer of the scene. I felt that I ought to do something to put a stop to it, but lacked the courage to interfere. It was only when a stone struck the boy on the face, cutting open his cheek, that I lost my normal discretion and ran in amongst the boys, shouting at them and clouting those I could reach. They scattered like defeated soldiery. I was surprised at my own daring and rather relieved when the boys did not return. I took the frightened, angry boy by the hand and asked him where he lived. He drew away from me, but I held on to his fat little fingers and told him I would take him home. I would take him home. He mumbled something incoherent and pointed down a narrow lane. I led him away from the bazaar. I said very little to the boy because it was obvious that he had some defect of speech. When he stopped outside a door set in a high wall, I presumed that we had come to his house. The door was opened by a young woman. The boy immediately threw his arms around her and burst into tears. I had not been prepared for the boy's mother. Not only did she look perfectly normal physically, but she was also strikingly handsome. She must have been about 35. She thanked me for bringing her son home and asked me into the house. The boy withdrew into a corner of the sitting room and sat on his haunches in gloomy silence, his bow legs looking even more grotesque in this posture. His mother offered me tea, but I asked for a glass of water. She asked the boy to fetch it, and he did so, thrusting the glass into my hands without looking me in the face. Suresh is my only son, she said. My husband is disappointed in him, but I love my son. Do you think he is very ugly? Ugly is just a word, I said. Like beauty, they mean different things to different people. What did the poet say? Beauty is truth, truth is beauty. But if beauty and truth are same thing, why have different worlds? There are no absolutes except birth and death. The boy squatted down at her feet, cradling his head in her lap. With the end of her sari, she began wiping his face. Have you tried teaching him to talk properly? I asked. He has been like this since childhood. The doctors can do nothing. While we were talking, the father came in and the boy slunk away to the kitchen. The man thanked me curtly for bringing the boy home and seemed at once to dismiss the whole matter from his mind. He seemed preoccupied with business matters. I got the impression that he had long since resigned himself to having a deformed son, and his early disappointment had changed to indifference. When I got up to leave, his wife, uh, his wife accompanied me to the front door. Please do not mind if my husband is a little rude, she said. His business is not going too well. If you would like to come again, please do. Suresh does not meet many people who treat him like a normal person. I knew that I wanted to visit them again, more out of sympathy for the mother than out of pity for the boy. But I realized that she was not interested in me personally, except as a possible mentor for her son. After about a week, I went to the house again. Suresh's father was away on a business trip, and I stayed for lunch. The boy's mother made some delicious parathas stuffed with ground radish and served it with pickle and curds. If Suresh ate like an animal, gobbling his food, I was not far behind him. His mother encouraged him to overeat. He was morose and uncommunicative when he ate. But when I suggested that he come with me for a walk, he looked up eagerly. At the same time, a look of fear passed across his mother's face. Will it be all right? She asked. You have seen how other children treat him. That day he slipped out of the house without telling anyone. We won't go towards the bazaar, I said. I was thinking of a walk in the fields. Suresh made encouraging noises and thumped the table with his fists to show that he wanted to go. Finally, his mother consented, and the boy and I set off down the road. He could not walk very fast because of his awkward legs, but this gave me a chance to point out to him anything that I thought might arouse his interest. Parrots squabbling in a banyan tree, buffaloes wallowing in a muddy pond, a group of hermaphrodite musicians strolling down the road. Suresh took a keen interest in the hermaphrodites, perhaps because they were grotesque in their own way. Tall, masculine looking people dressed in women's garments, ankle bells jingling on their heavy feet, and their long, gaunt faces made up with rouge and mascara. For the first time, I heard Suresh laugh. Apparently, he had discovered that there were human beings even odder than he, and like any human being, he lost no time in deriding them. Don't laugh, I said. They were born that way, just as you were born the way you are. But he did not take me seriously and grinned, his wide mouth revealing surprisingly strong teeth. We reached the dry riverbed on the outskirts of the town and crossing it entered a field of yellow mustard flowers. The mustard stretched away towards the edge of a subtropical forest. Seeing trees in the distance, Suresh began to run towards them, shouting and clapping his hands. He had never been out of town before. The courtyard of his house and occasionally the road to the bazaar were all that he had seen of the world. Now the trees beckoned him. We found a small stream running through the forest, and I took off my clothes and leapt into the cool water, inviting Suresh to join me. He hesitated about taking off his clothes, but after watching me for a while, his eagerness to join me overcame his self consciousness, and he exposed his misshapen little body to the soft spring sunshine. He waded clumsily towards me. The water, which came only to my knees, reached up to his chest. Come, I'll teach you to swim, I said, and lifting him up from the waist, I held him afloat. He spluttered and thrashed around, but stopped struggling when he found that he could stay afloat. Later, sitting on the banks of the stream, he discovered a small turtle sitting over a hole in the ground in which it had laid the eggs. He had never watched a turtle before, and watched it in fascination while it drew its head into its shell and then thrust it out again with extreme circumspection. He must have felt that the turtle resembled him in some respects, with its squat legs, rounded back, and tendency to hide its head from the world. After that, I went to the boy's house about twice a week, and we nearly always visited the stream. Before long, Suresh was able to swim a short distance. Knowing how to swim, this was something the bazaar boys never learned, gave him a certain confidence, made his life something more than a one dimensional existence. The more I saw Suresh, the less conscious was I of his deformities. For me, he was fast becoming the norm, while the children of the bazaar seemed abnormal in their very similarity to each other. That he was still conscious of his ugliness, and how could he ever cease to be, was made clear to me about 2 months after our first meeting. We were coming home through the mustard fields, which had turned from yellow to green, when I noticed that we were being followed by a small goat. It appeared to have been separated from its mother and now attached itself to us. Though I tried driving the kid away, it continued tripping along at our heels. And when Suresh found that it persisted in accompanying us, he picked it up and took it home. The kid became his main obsession during the next few days. He fed it with his own hands and allowed it to sleep at the foot of his bed. It was a pretty little kid with fairy horns and an engaging habit of doing a hop, a skip, and jump when moving about the house. Everyone admired the pet, and the boy's mother and I both remarked on how pretty it was. His resentment against the animal began to show when others started admiring it. He suspected that they found it better looking than its owner. I remember finding him squatting in front of a low mirror, holding the kid in his arms and studying their reflections in the glass. After a few minutes of this, Suresh thrust the goat away. When he noticed that I was watching him, he got up and left the room without looking at me. 2 days later, when I called at the house, I found his mother looking very upset. I could see that she had been crying, but she seemed relieved to see me and took me into the sitting room. When Suresh saw me, he got up from the floor and ran to the veranda. "What's wrong?" I asked. "It was the little goat," she said. "Suresh killed it." She told me how Suresh, in a sudden and uncontrollable rage, had thrown a brick at the kid, breaking its skull. What had upset her more than the animal's death was the fact that Suresh had shown no regret for what he had done. "I will talk to him," I said, and went out on the veranda. But the boy had disappeared. "He must have gone to the bazaar," said his mother anxiously. "He does that when he is upset. Sometimes I think he likes to be teased and beaten." He was not in the bazaar. I found him near the stream, lying flat on his belly in the soft mud, chasing tadpoles with a stick. "Why did you kill the goat?" I asked. He shrugged his shoulders. "Did you enjoy killing it?" He looked at me and smiled and nodded his head vigorously. "How very cruel," I said, but I did not mean it. I knew that his cruelty was no different from mine or anyone else's. Only his was an untrammeled cruelty, primitive, as yet undisguised by civilizing restraints. He took a penknife from his shirt pocket, opened it, and held it out to me by the blade. He pointed to his bare stomach and motioned me to thrust the blade into his belly. He had such a mournful look on his face, the result of having offended me, and not in remorse for the goat sacrifice, that I had to burst out laughing. "You are a funny fellow," I said, taking the knife from him and throwing it into the stream. "Come, let's have a swim." We swam all afternoon, and Suresh went home smiling. His mother and I conspired to keep the whole affair a secret from his father, who had not in any case been aware of the goat's presence. Suresh seemed quite contented during the following weeks, and then I received a letter offering me a job in Delhi, and I knew that I would have to take it, as I was earning very little by my writing at the time. The boy's mother was disappointed, even depressed, when I told her I would be going away. I think she had grown quite fond of me, but the boy, always unpredictable, displayed no feeling at all. I felt a little hurt by his apparent indifference. Did our weeks of companionship mean nothing to him? I told myself that he probably did not realize that he might never see me again. On the evening my train was to leave, I went to the house to say good boy. The boy's mother made me promise to write to them. But Suresh seemed cold and distant and refused to sit near me or take my hand. He made me feel that I was an outsider again, one of the mob, throwing stones at odd and frightening people. At 8 o'clock that evening, I entered a third-class compartment and after a brief scuffle with several other travellers, succeeded in securing a seat near a window. It enabled me to look down the length of the platform. The guard had blown his whistle and the train was about to leave when I saw Suresh standing near the station turnstile, looking up and down the platform. "Suresh!" I shouted, and he heard me and came hobbling along the platform. He had run the gauntlet of bazaar during the busiest hour of the evening. "I'll be back next year," I called. The train had begun moving out of the station, and as I waved to Suresh, he broke into a stumbling run, waving his arms in frantic, restraining gesture. I saw him stumble against someone's bedding. This was Most Beautiful by Ruskin Bond.